Hello, my name is Andrew Worth. I'm an artist out of West Windsor, New Jersey. I wasn't always an artist. My first life I was a software engineer where I developed software for some big technology companies, first at Belcor, which was a telecommunications company. I helped to write software that gave people phone service, and I was involved in one of the first information management processing software systems at Belcor. From there, I moved to a company called CNET, which is one of the early internet media companies, a company who was about publishing content online. And I helped there to build one of the very first content management systems for websites. But after a good run at CNET, I found myself a little bit burnt out and needing something different in my life. So I left the company, moved to Manhattan, and tried to figure out what I was going to do with my life. My first thought was that I might go and teach philosophy or go back to school for cognitive psychology, but kind of decided that reading papers for 4 or 5 years wasn't going to do it for me. So I started taking classes at all the various resources around New York. This included art schools such as the Art Students League, School of Visual Arts, the New School. I did a year of drawing at the Art Students League. One of the courses that I found really inspiring was something called Viewing Art Intelligently at the New School, taught by the artist John Zinzer, where he tells you what shows are going on throughout the city at the museums and the galleries, and then you go and see them on your own, and then when you come to class, he would tell you about the artists and put their work into an art historical perspective. It's the kind of class that you can take over and over and over again. I must have taken it 7 or 8 or maybe more times over a 6-year period, and it changes each semester based on what's going on in the city. So you'll see Manet, and you'll see Matisse, Picasso, and then you'll see other unknown artists at the Chelsea galleries. So it really helps you to develop a habit of seeing art and thinking about art. And after doing that for a couple of years, I decided that's what I wanted to spend my time on. So with all the art classes that I had taken, I started making art professionally. There was one moment, however, where I decided this was the particular style of painting that I was going to make. I was taking a class in abstraction at the 92nd Street Y, and the assignment that we had was to paint jugs and flower vases and cubes in an abstract way. And I was getting incredibly frustrated. I didn't like the way the colors were looking. I didn't like the way the paint was coming out onto the panel. And I just had this sudden urge to make these marks on top of what I was doing. These marks were like the mazes that I used to draw as a kid, and suddenly there was this click where there was this color interaction between the underpainting and the marks that I was now making, and it created a visual sensation of depth and opticality that I found was really interesting. And I took that idea, went home and played with it for, I don't know, several months before I sort of came up with a system that has worked well in my particular type of abstract painting. Well, abstraction in the history of art means a lot of different things. In some cases, it means non-representational paintings, so paintings that don't have direct similar looks to things in the real world. I come from the computer engineering world, where almost all problem solving happens through abstraction, where there's a real world problem that you then have to draw out from higher level concepts, and then figure out how to model those concepts in a computer program, for instance, to create a good solution to your problem. Abstraction, the word comes from abstrahere, which is to draw from, and I like to think of my paintings as they're certainly abstract because there's very few representational elements to them, but they're also about things by way of non-literal references. So there are things like the tone of color in a painting is a way of getting meaning into a work. The way that the forms change on the canvas is another way of getting meaning into work that are not representational. The titles that I choose are another way of adding meaning to an abstract work that might not be obvious from the image itself. Well, if you look around outside, you'll see beauty everywhere. You take a look at a leaf, you look at the patterns on many kinds of plants, and they have a regular pattern to them that we naturally find beautiful. Many of these patterns, many of these formations are the result of really mathematical processes playing out. And so I find it interesting to try and figure out how to use some of those processes in my artwork. We are evolved beings, and there are good arguments to say that we have evolved to like beautiful things because it improves our chance for survival. There are examples of birds who make nests for their mates or to attract mates that are beautiful, filled with color. And the ones that do the best job of that attract the most mates and are able to reproduce and get their species, get their offspring into the next generation. So there's a whole set of cases for how we've evolved to appreciate this sort of beauty in nature. We tend to think of vision as working like a camera, where the rays of light come into your eye and your brain sees the whole world all at once. But in fact, in many ways, the process of vision works very much like touch, where you have to actually explore and probe the world in order for the brain to make sense of things and to generate a model of the world. It turns out with the optical system, the vision system, it's the same way. You have to move your eyes around and you have to continually keep moving and probing for the mind to be able to detect differences and generate a model of the world that gives us our sense of seeing the world as it is. Most of my paintings start from the idea of some concept in cognitive science or philosophy of mind. And I'm interested in expressing those ideas in my paintings. And I do that through a bunch of formal techniques in my work. I'm interested, however, mostly in making an object that I think the viewer will find intriguing to interact with. Beautiful, hopefully, sublime, maybe, but one that the viewer will want to look at from far away, from close up, in bright lights and dim lights, get a different perceptual experience at different ways. But I don't go into the process thinking that the viewer is going to understand my sense of meaning, because some of them are far out there and are based on maybe esoteric concepts in philosophy of mind that it's great if the viewer is interested in. And occasionally I'll find somebody who I'll talk with about my paintings and who knows some of the concepts, and when they start to see what I'm explaining, they really get it and it clicks. Well, I've had this fantasy where hundreds of years from now, somebody will look at one of my paintings and be able to determine this was the phase when he was listening to jazz and this was the phase when he was listening to talk radio by the changes in my marks. But I don't really think that's possible. I do think that there's a lot going on in my work, and it would be interesting for somebody to to appreciate all those different knobs that we were talking about. Well, I hope the future still includes painting. They've said that painting is dead many times over the years, but I think it's still a vibrant medium for expressing ideas. I tend to be more interested when I go to look at art in painting than in other forms. So I hope painting doesn't disappear. I'm sure that with many new media, such as virtual reality and more digital computer technology, that more kinds of art will involve those technologies. My own interests continue to be to push the media of painting. Well, becoming an artist was certainly going out of my comfort zone. I was a hardcore engineer and a computer programmer since the age of 12. So the idea of leaving that behind and trying something different was a real change for me. When it comes to painting these days, I will often try to figure out how can I design a painting that's more challenging than the last one that I made, whether that's a more complicated underpainting or whether it's a particular strategy of applying the marks that I haven't done before. That is something that sort of pushes me out of my comfort zone. Maybe trying color combinations that I haven't used or a layering technique that I haven't used before. Sometimes when I've taken a little break from painting and I come back in to start some work, I will go back into the comfort zone. As soon as I had to do something maybe 2 or 3 times, I would rather build a tool to do it for me so that I didn't have to repeat myself. So it's sort of ironic that in my paintings now, I've chosen a style of painting that requires me to do something thousands and thousands and thousands of times per painting. Um, you know, building software, you've got somebody else giving you the problem, and you have to figure out an elegant solution to the problem. With painting, you're trying to figure out what the problem is and figure out whether you can solve it, and then how to solve it, and then to actually execute it. And my goal in a lot of my paintings, or not really the goal, but the thought process is, how can I design this in a challenging way that people will look at it and say, how the heck did he do that, from a just actually getting the paint onto the canvas point of view. I definitely never expected to be making art as a kid, although I liked art making, and I took art classes in high school, which was an elective. My mother and father tried to drag my brother and I to the art museums when we were a kid to give us some culture. And we went kicking and screaming, or at least I did. That was not something that I was very interested in doing as a kid. So I never would have imagined that was something that I would be doing later on in life.
Do you remember your first work, artwork?
I remember filling in, or let's see, I remember winning second prize at a drugstore contest for coloring in a Santa Claus drawing, color by number maybe. And I remember as a young child being fascinated by Altair Designs, which was a series of coloring books that were based on tessellations. And you could color them in any which way with markers or pencils and end up with things that were incredibly beautiful. And they were very meditative, just working on them. As a kid, you get completely engrossed in coloring them in different kinds of patterns and with different sort of algorithms, really, for filling in the shapes. And I remember that distinctly, around the age of 6 and 7. Over the years, you become familiar with the medium, and you know what you can do and what you can't do, or where you can try new things. Also, I'm part of a community of artists online that often discuss technique and tools and approaches, because I'm very interested in doing sort of best practices on my artwork so that the paintings will last. I'd like them to last a long time. And in terms of developing more skills as a painter, I learned things about different ways of mixing color, of applying color, of spreading color spectrums out and blending them and adjusting them that I definitely didn't have when I was first starting in this technique. I have these collectors in Pennsylvania who have, they started small with 1 or 2 paintings, and they've since bought maybe 6 or 7 more. And they've told me that they have a whole room dedicated to my artwork, that when people come in, they get the chance to explain what they know about my paintings to them, and then it's always a fun process for them. I had another woman once who saw one of my large paintings called Embodiment, and she looked at it and she started staring, and she was really engrossed with the painting. And she came up to me and she said, "I've been there. I've had a dream about this place that you made in your painting," which is really a fascinating experience as an artist, to have created something that sort of touches somebody in that way and really move them. I get all kinds of responses. Often kids come into the galleries and just run up to the paintings and start going wild at the marks and the colors and the color interactions, which is always fun to watch as long as they don't touch the paintings. And then I have people who say, "I don't get abstract art, but I like what you're doing here," which is always nice too. So sometimes it's hard, I understand, to get your head around why somebody would make an abstract painting. But for the most part, I've had good responses from people who even feel that way.
So is it good when you inspire someone to?
Yeah, I love it. When I go to see art, I want to feel, oh, I can't wait to get home to start painting because I've seen something really interesting. And I would love to do that as well. So if somebody were to see one of my shows and to think, ooh, I really want to create now, and I've learned something from looking at his work, that would be great.
That's great. It's okay for you?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks.